Some of you have been carrying this longer than others, and it shows up differently depending on where it's aimed. A relationship, a career, a body you're at war with, a version of success you haven't reached yet. The specific target doesn't matter for what's about to be explained. The mechanism underneath it is the same one every time. It has nothing to do with tricking anyone or playing a game. Genuine indifference, not the performance of it, the real thing, changes something measurable about how you show up, and other people and outcomes respond to that change, whether they can name it or not. Most people have already heard some version of "just don't care so much" as advice, and most people have correctly ignored it because it's usually delivered as a personality trait you either have or don't, not as a mechanism you can actually build. That's what's different here. Here's the trap almost everyone falls into the first time they hear this idea, and I want to name it up front so you don't waste months making the same mistake I did. The instinct is to try to act indifferent. Pull back, go quiet, stop texting first, and it fails almost every time because the person doing it is still gripping the outcome just as tightly underneath. They've just added a performance on top of the grip. That's desperation wearing a disguise, and disguises like this one are surprisingly easy for other people to see through, even when they can't say exactly what tipped them off. The real thing is quieter than a performance, and stranger than most people expect. It doesn't look like coldness. It looks like someone who has simply stopped needing something to go a particular way. And that state, once it's genuine, changes the entire dynamic around it. This isn't a video about becoming numb or about pretending the things you want don't matter to you. It's about the difference between two internal states that look almost identical from the outside and behave in completely opposite ways once you understand what's underneath them. One drains you and repels the outcome. The other costs you nothing and tends to draw it closer, or at the very least, leaves you whole either way. Most people spend years unable to make that distinction, cycling between white-knuckled effort and burned-out withdrawal, calling both of them letting go without ever finding the actual state in between. That confusion isn't a personal failing. Nobody teaches this distinction explicitly. It has to be pointed at directly, which is exactly what this video is about to do. Here's the uncomfortable question underneath everything we just described. What if wanting something intensely is the exact thing that makes it slip away? That sounds like an excuse to stop wanting anything. It isn't. Stay with the logic. When you want an outcome badly enough, your behavior changes in ways you can't fully control, no matter how disciplined you think you are. You check the phone one extra time. You over-explain in the meeting. You laugh a half-second too early at the joke, because some part of you is managing the room instead of being in it. None of this is conscious. It's not a character flaw. It's what desperation does to a nervous system. It hijacks behavior in the direction of the thing it's afraid of losing and broadcasts that fear outward, whether you intend it to or not. Here's something I'll admit plainly, because it's true and because pretending otherwise would make the rest of this video hollow. I've sent the reworded message 3 times too. I've laughed too early in a room I was desperate to be liked in. I know exactly what that broadcast feels like from the inside, and I know exactly how invisible it feels to the person doing it. You rarely catch yourself in the act. Other people catch it. That's the whole problem. Looking back, what strikes me most isn't that I was gripping. Everyone grips something at some point. It's how long I mistook the gripping itself for care. I genuinely believed the checking, the rehearsing, the managing was proof of how much something mattered to me, as if the volume of my anxiety were evidence of the depth of my feeling. It wasn't. It was just anxiety, dressed up convincingly enough that I didn't question the costume for years. And this is the part that explains why Just Act Indifferent fails so reliably. Acting indifferent is a performance layered on top of the exact same internal state. You still want it, you're just hiding that you want it. But hiding desperation doesn't remove the broadcast. It just adds a second layer of effort on top of the first. Now you're managing the outcome and managing the appearance of not managing it. That's not indifference. That's desperation wearing a costume. And people read costumes faster than they read almost anything else, even when they can't name what tipped them off. Think about the last time you could tell someone was performing calm while clearly wanting something badly. Maybe it was a coworker pretending not to care about a promotion while checking the org chart daily. Maybe it was someone on a date, working overtime to seem unbothered while their eyes tracked every reaction across the table. You could feel it, probably before you consciously registered what you were feeling. That's the tell operating on you, the observer, in real time. Now flip it around. The times you've been on the other side, performing that same unbothered calm, did it actually work, or did the other person seem to sense something was off, even if neither of you named it? There's a reason this signal is so hard to fake convincingly, and it has to do with what your body actually does under genuine desperation versus genuine ease. Desperation recruits far more of your nervous system than most people realize. Micro tensions in the face, subtle changes in vocal pitch and pacing, shifts in how quickly you fill silence instead of letting it sit. None of these are things you can consciously control one at a time while also trying to hold a conversation. You'd need to manage dozens of tiny signals simultaneously, and the part of your brain doing the managing is the same part that's supposed to be present in the conversation. Something gives. Usually it's the presence. Genuine indifference doesn't have this problem because there's nothing to manage. There's no gap between what you're feeling and what you're broadcasting, so there's no performance tax being paid in the background. This is the actual physical difference between the real thing and the copy, and it's why the copy so rarely fools anyone for long. There's a second reason performed indifference collapses under pressure, and it's worth naming, because it's the trap almost everyone falls into after the first one. Performance requires monitoring, checking whether you're succeeding at seeming unbothered, which means part of your attention is locked onto the very thing you're trying to appear unbothered about. It's the same trap as trying not to think about something. The checking mechanism keeps the target active. You can't perform not caring without caring about how well you're performing it, and that loop never fully closes on its own. Genuine indifference is not a costume. It's the absence of the underlying need, and that absence isn't something you can perform your way into. Which raises the real question this video needs to answer. If faking it doesn't work, what actually produces the real thing? The answer isn't a mindset trick you repeat to yourself in the mirror. It's closer to something you build deliberately, the same way you'd build any other skill. And the evidence for how it works comes from places you wouldn't expect to agree with each other. A friend of mine spent 2 years chasing a promotion that never came. He mentioned it in meetings. He stayed late in ways his boss couldn't miss. He asked gently at every performance review where things stood. Nothing moved. Then he got recruited by a competitor, accepted the offer, and mentioned it to his boss almost as an afterthought on his way out the door. No leverage intended, no strategy. He was already gone in his mind. His company countered within 24 hours with the exact promotion he'd been asking for 2 years, the moment he stopped needing it. He told me afterward that the strangest part wasn't the counteroffer itself. It was realizing how much energy he'd spent, for 2 straight years, managing a campaign for something that arrived unprompted the second he stopped running it. He didn't do anything differently that final week. He simply, genuinely, no longer needed the outcome. And the outcome showed up. This isn't a fluke story, it's a pattern precise enough that an entire field of negotiation theory is built around it. Researchers Roger Fisher and William Ury, in their foundational work on negotiation, formalized a concept now taught in business schools worldwide. Your leverage in any negotiation is determined almost entirely by your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Translated into plain language, the less you need this specific deal to work out because you have a real alternative, the more power you have inside the negotiation and the better terms you're offered without asking for them. This isn't a psychological trick you perform, it's math. The other party can sense, often unconsciously, how much you need the outcome, and they price their offer accordingly. Here's what makes this more than a negotiating tactic for boardrooms. The same logic runs underneath every kind of relationship, not just business deals. A person who has other options, not because they're collecting them strategically, but because they've built a life that doesn't depend entirely on this one outcome, negotiates every relationship from a fundamentally different position than someone who has none. It isn't coldness, and it isn't calculation. It's simply less breakable, and breakability is something other people register instantly, usually before either party says a word. Here's where this gets older than modern negotiation theory. Nearly 2,000 years earlier, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus built an entire school of thought around a strikingly similar idea, applied to the whole of a person's inner life rather than just a business deal. His core teaching, often called the dichotomy of control, draws one clean line. Some things are within your power, your judgments, your effort, your responses, and everything else is not. Outcomes, other people's opinions, whether a specific thing happens on your timeline, all of that sits outside the line. Epictetus argued that suffering comes almost entirely from treating things outside that line as if they belong to you, gripping outcomes you were never actually holding in the first place. This wasn't advice to stop caring about life. Epictetus was famously engaged, disciplined, and rigorous, the opposite of checked out. What he taught was a specific redirection of energy. Pour everything into what's actually yours to control, and hold the rest with an open hand, because gripping it doesn't get you more of it, it gets you less, and it costs you your peace on top of that. There's a detail in Epictetus's own biography that makes this less theoretical than it might sound. He spent part of his early life enslaved, in a position with almost no control over his external circumstances at all. And it was precisely from that position that he developed a philosophy built entirely around the one thing that remained his, no matter what: his own judgments and responses. This wasn't a comfortable man theorizing about detachment from a position of safety. It was someone who had almost nothing external to hold on to, discovering that the internal territory was enough and more reliable than anything external had ever been for him anyway. Modern psychology has, unknowingly, been rediscovering pieces of this same principle. Researchers Erin Whitchurch, Timothy Wilson, and Daniel Gilbert ran a study, published in the journal Psychological Science, that looked at how uncertainty affects attraction. Participants were shown profiles of people who had supposedly rated them. Some profiles indicated the person liked them a lot, some indicated they weren't sure, and some indicated they weren't interested. The finding surprised even the researchers. Participants reported liking the people who were uncertain about them more than the people who had clearly and strongly indicated interest. The uncertainty itself wasn't the pleasant part. What kept attention active was that certainty of being wanted closes the loop, and something in human attention is drawn toward what hasn't been resolved yet, toward the person who isn't handing over their full attention on demand. It's worth being precise about what this study does and doesn't show, because overstating it would undercut the whole point of building an argument on named, verifiable sources instead of vague claims. It doesn't say people prefer partners who reject them, and it doesn't say playing games works. It shows something narrower and more useful, that certainty, once fully resolved, tends to lower the intensity of attention a person pays to something, while genuine unresolved interest keeps that attention active. Real indifference isn't the same as engineered uncertainty, but both share the same underlying ingredient, an outcome that isn't being visibly, desperately chased. Put the negotiation research and the Stoic philosophy and the attraction study next to each other, and a single mechanism starts to emerge across three completely unrelated fields, separated by 2,000 years and entirely different methods. The less an outcome is visibly, desperately needed, the more power that outcome or that person holds over the people around it. Not because withholding is manipulative, because visible need changes how you're perceived, how you're valued, and how much effort other people believe they have to put in to keep you. So here's the deeper question this evidence forces open. If the mechanism is this consistent across negotiation, ancient philosophy, and modern relationship psychology, why does almost nobody practice it on purpose? Why do we default to visible desperation instead of the state that keeps showing up as more effective across every domain we've just looked at? Part of the answer is simple and worth naming before we go further. Desperation feels like doing something. Gripping an outcome feels active, responsible, like the effort itself is proof you deserve the result. Releasing that grip feels, at first, like doing nothing at all, which is exactly why it's so rarely chosen on purpose, even by people who've seen it work in someone else's life. It looks like passivity from the outside. It is not passivity. It's a redirection of exactly the same energy toward the only place it was ever going to be useful. Let's make this concrete, because there is almost certainly a specific outcome you're currently gripping this way. Here's how to find it precisely. Ask yourself, what's the one thing I check, mention, or think about with a frequency that's out of proportion to how much control I actually have over it? The job you're not in yet, the person who hasn't texted back, the number on the scale you've weighed yourself against 3 times today. That disproportionate frequency is the tell. It's the sign that something outside Epictetus's line has been treated like it belongs inside it. Now, here's the distinction that changes everything, and it's the one almost everyone gets wrong on the first attempt. The goal is not to perform not caring. We already established why that fails. It's desperation with a mask on, and masks slip. The goal is to genuinely relocate your attention to the part of the situation that's actually yours. Your effort, your standards, your next honest action, and let the outcome itself sit outside your grip. Not because you don't care what happens, but because gripping it was never actually getting you more of it. Let's separate this from a nearby idea it often gets confused with, because the confusion is common and it wastes people's time. This isn't about lowering your standards or deciding you don't deserve the outcome. Epictetus wasn't teaching resignation, and this video isn't either. You can hold extremely high standards for your own effort, your own honesty, your own preparation, the things inside the line, while genuinely releasing your grip on the outcome which sits outside it. In fact, that combination is usually what produces the outcome most reliably. Full effort, where effort belongs, and an open hand everywhere else. This is where most people flinch because it feels like a risk, like caring less will cause the very outcome you're afraid of. It's worth naming that fear directly instead of dismissing it. What if I stop checking and it really doesn't work out? Here's the honest answer. Sometimes it doesn't. Releasing the grip is not a guarantee. But you were never actually guaranteeing the outcome by gripping it either. You were just spending yourself down while it stayed exactly as uncertain as before. The choice was never grip and get certainty versus release and lose it. It was always grip and stay depleted versus release and stay whole, with the outcome uncertain either way. Try this literally, not as metaphor. Take the outcome you identified, the job, the person, the number, and write down specifically what part of it is actually inside your control, your preparation, your honesty, your consistency. Then write down what's outside it, their timeline, their decision, their feelings. Read the second list out loud. Let yourself actually feel how little of it was ever yours to hold in the first place. That feeling, slightly uncomfortable, slightly relieving, is the beginning of the real thing, not the performance of it. Do this exercise more than once with more than one outcome, because the pattern usually becomes clearer the second and third time than the first. Most people, once they run this exercise honestly across several areas of their life, notice the same handful of things keep landing on the outside my control list. Other people's decisions, timing, outcomes that depend on circumstances they can't see. And they notice the same handful of things keep landing on the inside my control list too. Effort, honesty, consistency, how they treat people regardless of what those people do in return. Seeing that pattern repeat is often more convincing than any single explanation could be. This won't feel natural at first, and it shouldn't. You've spent years, maybe your whole life, being told that caring harder is what separates people who get what they want from people who don't. Relearning this takes repetition, not a single insight, but the repetition works differently than gripping did, because every time you correctly sort what's yours from what isn't, you get a little more of your own attention back, instead of spending it all on something that was never yours to control. There's a follow-up question worth asking once you've done this once, because the first attempt is rarely the deepest one. Why did this particular outcome get promoted to mine to control in the first place? Usually there's an old belief underneath it, that being chosen proves your worth, that achieving this specific thing is what finally makes you enough. That belief is worth examining on its own, separately from the outcome itself, because it's usually the belief, not the outcome, that's been doing the actual gripping this whole time. This is worth sitting with a moment longer, because it reframes the whole exercise. If the real grip is on a belief about your own worth, then releasing your hold on the job, the person, or the number doesn't actually solve anything by itself. It just relocates the same anxiety onto the next outcome that comes along, unless the underlying belief gets addressed too. That's not a reason to skip the practical exercise. It's a reason to notice, honestly, whether the relief you feel after loosening your grip on one specific thing lasts, or whether it just migrates to whatever you start gripping next. But knowing this and living it are two different animals, because there's a deeper reason gripping is so hard to release, and it has less to do with the outcome you want than with what the grip has secretly been doing for your sense of safety. Here is the layer underneath the layer. Gripping an outcome isn't just ineffective, it's expensive, in a way that's rarely counted honestly. Every hour spent checking, monitoring, mentally rehearsing the outcome is an hour of attention withdrawn from the only thing that was ever actually yours to spend. Your own life running right now while you're somewhere else worrying about a future that hasn't happened. Ask yourself honestly, in the last week, how many hours did you spend physically present somewhere? A dinner, a conversation, a task, while some part of your mind was still checking on the thing you're gripping. That's not a small number for most people. It's often most of the week. There's a cost to this that compounds in a specific way, worth naming directly. Presence isn't just pleasant to have. It's functionally useful. It's what lets you notice the opportunity that doesn't look like the thing you were expecting. Catch the detail in a conversation that would have changed your response. Read a room accurately, instead of through the filter of what you're afraid might happen in it. Every hour spent half present, because part of you is still gripping an outcome, is an hour where that functional noticing simply wasn't available. It isn't a matter of carelessness. It's that attention is finite, and you'd already spent a chunk of it on something that wasn't even in the room with you. Here's what genuine indifference actually frees up. And it's not abstract. It's the exact attention that was being spent on monitoring. When you're no longer bracing for a specific outcome, you're fully present for whatever's actually in front of you, which means you notice more, respond faster, and read situations with a clarity that desperate attention structurally cannot access, because desperate attention is always half occupied by the thing it's afraid of losing. This is the actual mechanism behind the phrase, indifference is a weapon. It was never about coldness, and it was never about not caring. It's about where your attention is actually spent. A person who has genuinely released the grip on an outcome shows up fully to the moment in front of them, sharper, calmer, more attuned, and that quality is disproportionately attractive, disproportionately persuasive, disproportionately effective. Not because indifference itself is magnetic, but because full presence is, and full presence is only available to people who aren't secretly spending half their attention somewhere else. Notice something important here. This means the weapon in the title isn't aimed at anyone. It's not a tactic used against another person or a situation. It's simply what happens automatically as a side effect once your attention stops being divided. You're not doing anything to produce the effect. You're removing the thing that was preventing you from having it all along. I want to be honest about where this stops working, because a channel that only tells you the flattering version eventually loses your trust. Indifference is not a strategy for making a specific person love you or a specific outcome arrive on command. Used that way, it curdles right back into performance, because you're now practicing indifference in order to get the outcome, which means you never actually released the grip at all. You just changed its disguise. Real indifference doesn't have a hidden agenda attached to it. It's not a technique aimed at a result. It's an honest relocation of where your care goes, toward what's yours, away from what was never yours, and the results that follow are a side effect of that honesty, not the point of it. The moment indifference becomes a tactic aimed at a specific outcome, it stops being indifference and becomes the exact desperation it was supposed to replace, just with better manners. There's a test worth running on yourself to tell the difference, and it's simple enough to apply in the moment. Ask, if I release this grip and the outcome goes the way I feared, will I be devastated, or will I be disappointed and okay? Devastation is the signature of a grip that was never actually released. It means the outcome was still standing in for something more fundamental, usually your sense of worth or safety. Disappointment and okay is the signature of the real thing. You wanted it. You'd have liked it to go a certain way, but your life doesn't collapse if it doesn't, because your sense of yourself was never actually staked on it in the first place. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this video, because it's the difference between indifference as a genuine internal shift and indifference as one more clever strategy aimed at controlling an outcome you're still, underneath it all, desperately gripping. That's not a smaller promise than, just stop caring and you'll get everything you want. It's a truer one. And it's the only version of this that actually holds up once you've tested it against your own life. The version that promises guaranteed outcomes was always going to fail you eventually, because it was built on the same desperate need for certainty that started this whole problem. The version built on presence and honest effort doesn't need the outcome to cooperate in order to be worth practicing. It's worth practicing on its own terms, regardless of what happens next. I want to talk to you directly for a moment, because statistically, If you've watched this far, you already know which outcome this video has been describing. You know what you've been gripping. You've known since the first minute, even if you didn't let yourself fully admit it while the explanation was running. Maybe it's a person whose attention you've been quietly managing for. Maybe it's a job, a number, a version of your life you keep checking your progress against, like refreshing a page that was never going to load any faster from being refreshed. Here's what I actually want you to sit with quietly, not as a task to complete, but as a question to hold. What would it feel like to actually let that outcome sit outside your control? Not abandoned, not given up on, just no longer gripped. Not performing calm, actually loosening the hand. Some of you have been gripping something for so long that loosening feels like it would mean you stopped caring entirely. It wouldn't. The people and outcomes worth caring about were never asking you to grip them. They were asking you to show up honestly, and gripping was never the same thing as showing up. It just felt like it, because it was so much louder. I'll say this plainly, because it's the honest center of what I've learned from doing this myself. The outcomes that actually mattered to me never once needed me to grip them to arrive. The ones I gripped hardest were usually the ones that were never going to work out regardless, and the gripping just meant I spent months finding that out the hard way, instead of weeks. The outcomes that were genuinely right for me showed up whether I was gripping or not. That's not mysticism, that's what happens when you stop confusing intensity of anxiety with likelihood of a good result. They were never the same thing. This is the part where I'd normally tell you it gets easier fast. It doesn't, not at first. The first few times you consciously loosen your grip on something you've been holding for years, it will feel less like relief and more like free fall, because for a while, some part of you built its entire sense of stability around the gripping itself, not around the outcome it was gripping. That's uncomfortable, and it's supposed to be. Stay with it anyway. The free fall feeling passes faster than the years of gripping ever did. If there's only one thing you take from this video into the rest of your week, let it be this. The next time you catch yourself checking, rehearsing, or managing something for the 10th time in a day, pause and ask out loud if you need to, is this actually mine to hold? Most of the time, the honest answer will surprise you with how quickly it arrives. Let's return to where we started. The reworded message, the mentioned promotion, the performance in the room, adjusting for approval. We asked at the beginning why none of that ever worked the way you needed it to. Why the grip kept failing no matter how tightly you held on. Now you know why. The grip wasn't just failing to help, it was actively working against you, broadcasting the exact need you were trying to hide, spending the exact attention that presence requires, and confirming to everyone around you, without a single word, how much power you'd handed over to something that was never yours to control in the first place. Here's the layer this video hasn't said yet, the one that changes how you'll think about wanting things going forward. You were never actually choosing between caring and not caring. You were choosing between two different places to put your care. Onto the outcome, where it drains you and changes nothing, or onto your own presence, effort, and honesty, where it's the only thing that was ever actually yours to spend. That reframe applies to every relationship, every goal, every version of yourself you've been trying to force into existence through sheer intensity. The intensity was never the ingredient doing the work. It just felt like it was, because it was the loudest thing in the room, including inside your own head. There's a certain irony worth sitting with as we close. A video about indifference has just spent 30 minutes making a very intense case for it. That's not a contradiction. Caring deeply about getting this distinction right and holding the outcome of whether it lands for you loosely are not opposites. They're the same skill, aimed in two different directions at once. Full effort where effort belongs and open hand everywhere else. That's the whole video, compressed into one sentence. Once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. Every future moment you feel the grip tightening, you'll be able to ask the sharper question, is this mine to control? Or have I been gripping something that was never actually in my hands? Ask it before you check the phone again. Ask it before you rehearse the conversation a fourth time. The pause itself is where the shift actually starts. That single distinction, the one this entire video has been building toward, is worth more than any amount of wanting harder ever was. Not because wanting is wrong, because you were pouring it into the wrong half of the equation the entire time, and no amount of intensity fixes a targeting problem. The grip was never protecting you. It was just the loudest thing you knew how to do with your fear. Set it down. See what's actually standing there once your hands are free. If there's one outcome this video pulled into focus, put it in the comments in 5 words or less. I've been gripping skag. Naming it is the first honest step toward loosening it. And if this way of seeing things shifted something in you, subscribing here isn't about the algorithm. It's a small contract with the version of you that's learning to hold outcomes loosely instead of gripping them white-knuckled. Every week, one more piece of the mechanism. If today's idea, that real indifference is a relocation of attention, not a performance, is one you want to go deeper on, there's a companion piece that lays out exactly how to practice this day to day. It's a short ebook, quietly pinned in the comments below this video, worth a slow read if this is a pattern you keep circling back to in your own life. And if this idea already has you thinking differently about the things you've been holding too tightly, tomorrow's video takes it somewhere stranger, into a state most people dismiss without ever actually testing it, and why it might be the most practical thing on this channel. It's called Quantum Manifestation Explained, why it's so easy but almost no one dares practice it. And if today opened a door, that one walks through it. Hold it loosely,